another episode of the Doomloop Dispatch, the news show that covers the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm your host, Kevin L. Jones. Sadly, D. Scott Miller will not be with us. He's tied up at the moment, but we have a great episode for you anyways. We have the wonderful, probably, I think the only person that's been on 3 times on our podcast.
Oh, wow.
How important she is
Time.
to us, do this show. Brandee Marckmann of the San Francisco Education Alliance. So, hey there, Brandee. How you doing?
I'm good. It is always great to be on the Doomloop Dispatch. I just really appreciate all the work that you're doing. It is so needed in this time for all you guys do is tell the truth. And sadly, that's somewhat rare in journalism.
Yes, exactly. And this is a big part of why I wanted to do this episode today. Because, honestly, we're seeing it again from the legacy media. We are seeing another attack on San Francisco schools. Rallying up parents again about ethnic studies and needing more math. And but first, before we get into this stuff, because that's why we're talking today, you recently published a wonderful article with the Phoenix Project, all about how the San Francisco recalls were kind of like the first salvo and kind of the lay down a strategy for right-wing groups to attack public education. It's honestly, I'm going to link to it. Everyone needs to read it. It's really important because Brandee lays it all out. But I wanted to ask first, are you seeing this recall tactic that basically, it's, even though parental rights is kind of an old strategy and an old talking point, it seems like that's ramping up again. Are you seeing this in other cities too?
Oh, definitely. Yes. When I was over the last part of my kids' spring break, I was in Columbus, Ohio for a conference with the Network for Public Education, an organization started by an education historian by the name of Diane Ravitch. And it's over 200 grassroots organizations, NEA, National Education Association, AFT, American Federation for Teachers, Randy Weingarten spoke, and Tim Waltz spoke as well, which was really exciting.
Hope he energized you, right? Yeah, he's a great speaker.
Yeah. Oh, and I went to sessions that were panels and heard from organizations and parents and allies and teachers all over the U.S. In Wisconsin, I heard a panel. They're dealing with Mothers for Liberty. Parents for Defending Education is big in Florida. And so this is part of the national playbook. And whether or not we admit it, this San Francisco is a part of that. Definitely. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and it was almost like the sandbox, right? The kind of lab for this new strategy that they're are using everywhere else.
Exactly.
Getting parents riled up. Look what they're doing to your kids, indoctrination.
Yeah. And I've mentioned this on the show before. There tends to be the San Francisco exceptionalism. I moved here about 20 years ago from Toronto. I'm from Iowa originally, but my husband is Canadian. And so even 20 years ago when San Francisco was much more, I guess you could say, progressive than it is now, it just felt very strange to be in a place where people are like, oh yeah, we're sort of like, we don't have problems like the rest of the US. And I thought, well, I came from Canada. And, Canadians kind of have that exceptionalism too. They're like, oh, and in Canada, we don't have well, yeah, we do. There is kind of that same flavor of maple washing, as it called. We sort of have that Bay Area washing or San Francisco washing. And I'm forgetting the name of it, but James Baldwin once made a documentary film about being in San Francisco and just talking about how sometimes the anti-Black racism he felt here was stronger than it was in Alabama. And I remember he interviewed some folks who said, yeah, we're from Alabama. And like, here you'll just see like, oh, well, we don't have any jobs. It just comes in a very, people just don't really see it as a problem, but yeah, it's a problem here. It's just the same pattern all over the US and we need to fight it. It is something that's here. It is within our district. It is not just something that is in Florida.
Yes, yes, yes. Especially too, and it's also, it's not always the same. It's not the people you would think that are really, pushing the racism as well and being racist. Especially what in this, the whole thing is what in the South. It's like we can live next to each other or just don't talk to each other. While in the Bay Area or like the North, it's we could talk to each other, but we're not going to live next to each other. Like we're, that's we're creating white flight.
Yeah. There's a book I've mentioned on this show before called Mothers of Mass Destruction, and where I saw this really was when my son was young, and I was in online groups with other parents. And some of the things people would say that it just seemed so racist and so coded to me. Things I never really heard when I grew up. I grew up an hour north of the Mason-Dixon line. I grew up a farm in Southwest Iowa, and just some things that people would say would just be like, "Are you really saying that?" Or yeah. So yeah, it is here. It's a problem.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, again, it's even the people that, you would think, like, oh, I'm good. But yeah. Oh, there's something there. I mean, merit, that's all I got to say. And actually, so that brings us to the topic today. It seems like we're seeing a repeat almost of 2020, but kind of like the original San Francisco recalls. It definitely seems like they want to activate the parental base. We've had two stories that seem like they're getting very pushed by the right. You have one story about ethical grading, which everyone's making it sound like they're going to be easy on the kids. They're just going to give everyone A's, which, talk to any teacher that really cares about their work and their passion, and you'll find that they hate how grading is now and any kind of adjustment to it. I mean, that's why you find so many private schools and newer schools don't even give grades. It's all about assessments,
Oh yeah. There's a school that's it's on the west side of San Francisco called Presidio Hill. Great school. And they don't have grades. It's a K-8, and parents pay $40,000 a year for their kids to go through this school. About 5 years ago, I went to hear Cornel West speak at I'd forgotten the name of the book, but he just released a book, and he made a really accurate statement. He said, "Rich kids get taught, and poor kids get tested." And so I think there's just all of this sorting that people need to have. And I think like some people have everyone, I just want to acknowledge, all parents want their kids to do well, but we have sometimes, our school district has become, and not our school district, but yes, I guess I should say our school district, there's an overemphasis on numbers, like what are your test scores? What are your grades? And they're only looking at English and math, where they're not looking at like, how do we educate the whole child? But if that's not what wealthy parents in San Francisco want, they want to send their kids to schools where they're really looking at what the kids learn. And and I think I was in a book group once where we were reading a book. Again, the name of it is escaping me, and it was about how too much pressure on kids and how that's bad, and I heard some parents in that group, and some saying, I grew up with a lot of pressure, and it was really hard. And so sometimes I've seen these same parents, backing some of these things. And I think as parents, I know myself, like, how was I raised, and was that really beneficial? So I don't want to trash parents, but I think that sometimes we can put too much pressure on our kids. And it's like, well, what is the point of school? Is it just to get good grades? And when we look at equity and grading, we have some kids who just have a lot more challenges of other kids. I mean, if you talk to parents of kids with disabilities, their kids work just as hard as anybody else. But I just think there needs to be a de-emphasis of grades.
Yeah.
And I'm somebody who got good grades in school. My kid does okay. So, but I think there's so much teach to the test that goes on that what are we about? Why aren't we focusing more on things like art, expanding our art programs in schools? And I want to say that our public schools, I think, do a really good job of providing arts, really better than privates. A lot of private schools don't have symphonic band, they don't have orchestra, but because we have bigger numbers in middle school and high school, we can provide some of the opportunities that these private schools don't. I think, to be honest, that's what most parents care about. I think there's just a lot of parents but that's what gets clicks on the internet. This angry parent, like, oh, people are angry, let's read about it. So a lot of it is just driven by a profit motive more than this is what parents are really talking about.
Yes.
A lot of the parents in my group, we all want our kids to do well. We try to be involved in their education as much as we can. But it's that I don't think this is like an average parent thing. I think there are just a few parents who get platformed a lot by legacy media. And there's they will give legacy media quotes that drive clicks, that drive ads.
Yes. And that's why I wanted to share this story, and I will link to this story in the comments, but how news reporters are being deceived by fake groups of moms, to attack public schools, because honestly, there's such a push that the reporters feel like, oh, I got to cover this. But also too, that they're willing to give that platform because, they probably kind of agree with it. Jill Tucker.
I know. I was, Jill Tucker defended a group that I heard a lot about when I was at the Network for Public Education conference in Columbus, called the Parents Defending Education. It is a full-on right-wing group. The Southern Poverty Law Center makes a mention of them in several articles on its website. This is not just an angry, these are extremists. And so it's like, well, why aren't you mentioning that to your readers? Why are you omitting that? Or it's because you just think it's okay. I asked her online, are you aware of this? And I didn't get a response, but I think
if she was a good reporter, she would be aware of it.
Oh yeah. The public needs to know things like this. And the San Francisco Parent Coalition is actually a chapter of the National Parents Union. The National Parents Union gets money from Koch. It gets money from the Walton Foundation, which is the Walmart people, which is very pro-charter school. Their leader and founder, Carrie Rodriguez, is on the board for Democrats for Education Reform, which is a pro-charter school group. And I recently read an article written by a professor by the name of Morris Cunningham saying that Democrats for Education Reform is like going more MAGA, because they know in order to get vouchers, in order to get charter schools, they're going to have to link with MAGA forces, because a lot of the country, most people are not in favor of charters. Even in red states, there are a lot of rural folks who are in red states. I grew up in Southwest Iowa, which is extremely red. And Iowa, unfortunately, recently passed a voucher bill, but there have been a lot of folks in rural areas who are saying, like, these vouchers don't serve our kids. There's no private school in our county. So we've seen these kind of things for a long time. And I remember earlier in the pandemic, this is before there was a vaccine, I was driving, I'd gone to the Mission District, was driving back, drove by City Hall, and Decreasing the Distance, which is the former name of the San Francisco Parent Coalition, was having a rally, reopen the schools. This was in, I think, January or February of 2020.
Oh my God.
There were no vaccines out for people. I remember this guy riding by in a bike shouting, like, you guys are crazy. But Kevin, I'll tell you, I have never seen so many white parents in San Francisco. There must have been 1,000. And I'm telling you, it was whiter than a gun show. And I remember, and I talked to some of these parents. I said, I'm really confused because I'm an SFUSD parent, and SFUSD parents only make up 12%. White parents only make up 12% of SFUSD, or actually not parents, but our students. And this woman said, well, that's because, other parents, parents, Black parents, they can't come, they can't show up. They usually don't show up. They're busy. And I've been to school board meetings where Black and brown parents pack the room because they're very invested in their education. So I'm just like, no, y'all are here because you bought into this conspiracy theory that it's safe to send kids back to schools with windows that don't open and a poor ventilation, when we don't have a vaccine. It's like, just a few more months, there had been a vaccine. So this is just like this ginning up energy. But anyway, kind of back to the outright, I will never forget this. And I took a picture of it. There was a woman holding a sign that said, and this was mentioning the renaming, said, I would go to Ted Cruz School, elementary school, if it were open. I took a picture of that. And they posted this, the San Francisco Parent Coalition posted this on their website with this picture, this photo, saying that, and it was a kid who was holding it, their parent, probably, who knows, but said, oh, haha, kids come up with the greatest signs. I just said, how crass is that?
Yeah.
Especially when so many kids are worried about ICE coming in their schools. Like I spend a lot of time in Texas. I have relatives down there. Nobody's going to go to a school that says Ted Cruz Elementary School. They're worried they're going to get deported or worse. I mean, yeah. So I think a huge, yeah. So that stuff is here. It's in San Francisco.
Yep.
For
and
sure.
It's just one of those things. I mean, it's the upper class people that don't care about teachers. They don't care about their teachers' health, anything like that. They're willing to sacrifice them. That was a big part of this. But now we're here, we're here now, and it seems like it's this kind of movement is ramping up again with both the ethical grading and these attacks on ethnic studies, which is very shocking too. This is almost kind of, it didn't get the same attention as the ethical grading, because the ethical grading is perfect red meat for the red side. But ethnic studies getting attacked too. But it really seems also too a way to activate the base. Why do you think these groups, I mean, especially you're seeing, I thought Meredith Dodson had disappeared. Now it seems like she's activated again. Why do you think these people are being activated? Why do you think this is they're giving this meat to the base again?
So what there are people in the US, this is the far right, who just do not believe that there should be any public schools. They want to do away with public education. They just want to have private schools, religious schools without her.
William Obendorf, who was a big fan of Milton Friedman, and Milton Friedman famously does not believe that everyone should earn or be given a good education. I mean, that's why he's such a scumbag. But anyways, go ahead.
And really the architect of the critical race theory, anti-critical race theory hysteria, is a man by the name of Chris Rufo, who works at the Manhattan Institute. And he has said, so if you create this angry, upset energy around public schools, parents will just turn away and send their kids to private schools. They just don't, like, oh, that's so dysfunctional. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And so that when you get this kind of narrative, like, oh, our public schools are so horrible. And this is what I saw when I was a new mother, at just seeing some of these, like, oh, the public schools are scary and your kids get hurt and all of this. Like there are a lot of people who profit off that. I mean, there are, parents who send their kids to private schools who want to feel good about their decision. They want to get enrollment numbers up. So the more chaos this is sort of the Christopher Rufo theory, is that people just won't send their kids to public schools. And by the way, Christopher Ruffo's, I don't think she's there anymore, but his former colleague at the Manhattan Institute is Diane Yap, who is just absolutely notorious for saying some of the most vile anti-Black things on social media, which it does not make her, any different than a lot of people. But what makes her different from a lot of people is that she got platformed when she attacked a Black school board member, Allison Collins, who was probably the strongest voice we had against charter schools, who had a prolific blog. And so Diane doing this was to create this narrative that public schools are bad. Just create this angry, scary energy. I think I posted it on social media a couple years ago, but I was at a school board meeting where Diane spoke, and she said such horrible racist things that I'm not going to repeat, that they had to, the school board decided to stop the meeting and evacuate the building. People were just so upset. And so this is the kind of, but I will say, this is also why I am very proud to have send my kid to public school, because, we stand for values that I want him to have. And I will say, it's a little like we have a very diverse population at SFUSD, kids of different needs. We have some schools that have had, just historic disinvestment in them, who have amazing teachers, and don't really deserve the credit that they should have, or don't really get the credit that they deserve. And I will say, by and large, a lot of our kids have a great experience in public school. So I will say, like, there is this angry energy isn't always the reality at our schools. I mean, yes, they're underfunded, there are other issues, we live in a world that's not perfect, but this is why I really believe in public education, because we meet kids where they are. If a kid needs help, and they have a disability, the district is legally bound to serve that kid. You don't get that in charter schools. You don't get that in private schools. And so as a parent, those are my values, and those are the values I want my kid to have as well.
Or unless the private school is basically set up for that,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have good friends who have and I've said this before when I've come on here, I am not anti-charter school. I am not anti private school or people who send their kids to those schools, because I have some kids, some parents who's are friends of mine who's have just not gotten those services for public schools, so there's but these same parents know who I believe in public schools. I believe just like there wasn't the money to help my kid out. And so I made this, I'm not about going after people or individuals. I'm just more about looking about the system, even the SF Parent Coalition. I'm I don't hate those folks, they're just I don't believe what they're doing, but how do we change the system? I think, is really, really what I try to think about and focus on.
Yeah, and I have a few little asides. First off, I'll point out just one really messed up thing Diane Yap said, and she is basically described Black people as being farm equipment in a tweet. Yeah. And bad stuff. She was that racist, people. So don't play that off. And for some reason, the only thing she seemed to kind of redeem herself was that she was against the genocide in Gaza, which was out of nowhere.
Yeah. I think that does need to be called out. I'm glad you brought that up, Kevin, because not just was she, some random troll on the internet. She was the vice president of the Friends of Lowell Foundation. She was on the Lowell alumni. And this is nothing new. This is not, she just started acting that way. She has been writing stuff like that on social media for years. And yep. I am glad the Lowell community just put up with it for a long time. So that also, Lowell is seeing it as its admissions go down. And I'm not sure what that's about. I will say, and this is just one story. I have heard a lot of parents of kids with disabilities say their kids don't get accommodated well at Lowell, because that is not a lot of what Lowell is about. Lowell is not about meeting every kid where they are as a public.
It's the elites.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I see a day, I don't know when it'll be, that Lowell will go back to having equitable admissions, having legal admissions like all other schools do. And again, I don't think a lot of parents are just oh, I have to get my kid into Lowell. I mean, I don't want to acknowledge Lowell serves some kids well, but I'm just someone who that's why I have a problem with Trump. I believe in rule of law, especially human rights. This is not a left issue or a right issue. This is just we need to be following the law, and human rights say that kids should have equal access to a public school if it meets the definition in the California Education Code. So, and that is why we are sort of in this mess as we are in a society, is that we've just put up or tolerated with people who aren't following rule of law when it comes to human rights.
Totally. And a big part too, speaking of Lowell High, which, you know, that was kind of one of the reasons there was the recalls back in 2020 is that or 2021 is that they, you know, pushed to change admissions, and that activated a parent base that was really against it because they were like, oh, this is going to affect my kid's education. And that's so much of these politics are about activating a base, a parental base, you know, especially when you talk about families and their children. You can't be more, you know, like you can't find a more hot button issue. You know, you can't find a bigger button to just piss somebody off and get them going. Like I was going to say too, we were talking about, you know, the stress of schools. Well, I remember back in the mid-10s, Berkeley was considering getting rid of its AP program, its AP classes, because it would free up money to basically get all these kids out of the tracking, you know, like, you know, if you get into a certain level and you're at a certain income level, you're basically tracked through schools. And they wanted to stop that. They wanted to fight that. And a big part of that was to free up the money from AP classes. But what did that do? That activated the parents. You're not going to take away this basically elitist way to help my kids, you know, get into better colleges and stuff like that. Even though, you know, they showed that actually the kids didn't like the AP classes, they just added to their stress. Didn't matter, you know. I remember even talking to Cy Musiker about this. I don't know if you remember him from KQED, but he was even like, "Oh yeah, if you try to take away my kids' AP classes, I would have fought it." And it's just like, even if there was studies showing it really didn't help, yeah, no, because of that's what I want for my kids, and I want the best for my kids, you know? So that being said, you know, these activated bases and stuff, like, for one, are we going to, do you think we're going to see more of a repeat? And what do you think, again, is the end goal this time? Is it just attacking public education, or is it maybe too, because we've been seeing losses. We've been seeing the network state guys, the Gary Tans, the Philip Dreyfuses losing. Are they getting panicked and maybe going back to the playbook to kind of get their base going again and get the kind of outcomes they want?
Yeah, I think they just always try this. There's just always some new tactic. And I think also one thing, the San Francisco Parent Coalition has said many times, oh, we're not into, you know, school privatization or turning San Francisco into a charter school town. They actually are trying to start a K-8 Mandarin immersion program that is a charter school. And one of their leaders, she's listed as a San Francisco Parent Coalition leader, is on the board of this charter school. And it's a K-8 Mandarin immersion. We have Mandarin immersion in SFUSD. We even have some empty seats in middle schools, but they're just not in the sides of town where parents live. And if it were up to me, our schools would have so much money, it wouldn't be funny. But the reality is, and I'm sad that's this way, like we're in a fiscal deficit right now. We're like at this, it's like, wait a minute here. Like we have sort of different needs. We have to make sure that we have money for school lunches that might get cut. This district has a legal obligation to a federal law to serve students with disabilities. Those things have to come first. And so we can't, like, my husband is from Quebec. I would love for my kid to go to like immersion French school and not have to pay for it. But, you know, that's just, I will say school districts have to make, there's always a tension between sometimes what individual parents want for their kids, which isn't necessarily bad. And that there's a tension between that and what the large school community needs, what the community needs, what society is. We might have some kids or some parents who say, I don't want my kids to learn about ethnic studies. Well, that might be how you feel, but what we need to do to prepare these kids for the workforce. And I can tell you, like, some reading these online, you know, mom groups, I mean, these kids need ethnic studies. really badly. I mean, I will say my husband was doing, he was chaperoning a field trip at my kids' elementary school, and the anti-Black racism he heard just like be floored. Like, he had to get after kids. Like, you shouldn't be saying that, And so, yeah, we need ethnic studies in our schools. We need that K through 12 ethnic studies, quite frankly. Because also, whether or not you believe this is just a right and good and moral thing, and this is society we want to live in, like, you don't want your kid to get fired, like, go to the job, even if it's just that self, what you want for your kid. Yeah, we need ethnic studies. Look at who's in our White House. Do we not, we should be just hell-bent and demanding everything that Trump wants to destroy.
Yeah.
And just, I just do want to call out like some of the misinformation from the Jill Tucker article about they use this is what they do. They pull out one or two examples. This is such a San Francisco thing, like, oh, renaming wasn't perfect, so we can't have it, or oh, this is, there was, and my husband grew up like an hour from Philadelphia, so I know my Philadelphia history. So where I'm going with this, they mentioned Mumia Abu-Jamal, and how he would. So I'm just going to say right off the top, Archbishop Desmond Tutu released a video a few years ago asking for Mumia Abu-Jamal's release.
Wow.
And so what the Parent Coalition leaders were complaining about was that kids were having to write letters to this Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was Amnesty International has said that he deserves a new trial. So what happened basically, this is like 30 or 40 years ago. He was driving down around Philadelphia at night. It was a taxi driver, saw police in an altercation with his brother, got out. The police officer was killed. There were 4 eyewitnesses. They all said that Mumia Abu-Jamal was not the killer. And they got so much harassment by the police. One guy was, I'm trying to think of his name, William Singletary. He was a decorated Vietnam vet and a Philadelphia businessman. He was held for hours by the police, who tore up his accounts of saying like it was another guy. And he finally relented and said a statement saying, I don't see the shooting. And he was forced to abandon Philadelphia by constant police harassment and suspicious damage to his gas station. And he left Philadelphia. The only person they said who said that he was the killer was a woman who was a prostitute, who everybody, not that's thing, but that everybody who was an eyewitness said like she wasn't even at the scene of the crime. And so I think what people don't want to know about is Mumia Abu-Jamal's was like, he was a victim of police brutality. And like, yes, this is somebody who should not have been in solitary confinement for years and years. I mean, I'm sorry, if Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who got a Nobel Prize winner, is saying this person is likely innocent and needs a new trial, then like, why are some groups opposed to that? I mean, you really want to argue with Archbishop Desmond Tutu about this? I mean, so this is why we need ethnic studies, because we've got people like Jill Tucker, publishing this false information. Yes. So like, I know my Philadelphia history.
Yeah.
I know how racist the cops there can be. Just one other thing. There was a community there. I'm just forgetting about the name of it. But anyway, they had, this was May 13th, 1985. So it's like, is this
the MOVE bombing?
The MOVE bombing, yes. So there was a group there. They were a radical group. The police came and ordered them to get out, but they had guns all around. People felt like they couldn't get out. So the police bombed the house, yes, and it destroyed 60 homes, yeah, around that area. And people who lived there are saying like, yeah, they weren't maybe the most quiet neighbors, but like, we didn't want to have World War III. 250 people became homeless. This was the Philadelphia Police Department. So if people don't know that history, they'll be like, why is SFUSD doing that? Yeah, SFUSD is, taking the side of Archbishop Desmond Tutu about a political prisoner.
Yeah.
But like, but I don't want to focus too much on that, because I think like they kind of like they want to get people in the weeds and like, talk. I mean, it's an important thing to lift up. It's like, okay, you want kids to learn history? Let's learn history. Let's talk about this. But I don't think Jill Ticker's going to publish a retraction or another story about that. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, that's what I've seen, especially in the comments that are pushing against ethnic studies. It's like, we have reading issues. People are reading, and blah, 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 blah. So we should be focused. Like, it should be 80% of our schools just should be math and reading. And it's just like, well, I don't think education. I mean, all these people want to come at it from their things, while honestly, what people don't want to talk about is education science is very advanced. I mean, really, there is so much, and especially people want to do like very simple solutions for all this stuff, but it's like anything, it's nuanced, but here's the thing. We have years and years of research on education, on what works and what doesn't work, like it's even down to reading and math, and we've learned that actually having an open curriculum, providing things like social studies and stuff like that helps that, it all works together. But I think also too, a big part of that is like, well, we want people to be dumber. We want people to be more racist, because that way they protect the status quo.
We can get them fighting, and then it's easier for us to control them. They won't push back. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You mentioned one thing, like another advantage of ethnic studies is they did San Francisco has had this since 2010. So they did a study of kids who've gone through this ethnic studies course, and SFUSD course is really great. And it's really great because, shout out to San Francisco State University, who was the first and only college to have university to have a college of ethnic studies, which only came about because of student and faculty strikes in 1968. That's something we should be really proud of. But they looked at the kids who took ethnic studies class as a control group. Like, there was much higher attendance, much higher grades in other classes. Talk about grades, because kids felt like school was relevant. I mean, a lot of the like revolutionary stuff I learned after I graduated from high school, I'm like, wow, if I had learned about this in high school, this would have been, there's a spark that's lit when kids learn about this stuff. I don't hear kids saying they don't want to take ethnic studies. I've never heard that. So who is this for? And Kevin, you mentioned the hyper focus on math and reading. So I care about math and reading. Everybody, I'm 5 years. I ran an adult ESL program. It's obviously I care about English. So the reason why there's this focus on the test score is these test scores right after the recall. They got away with all of the oversight committees on the Board of Education. We used to have a budget and business service committees, HR and personnel, program and curriculum, building and grounds committee. They were basically made up of 3 school board members. Then they would meet once a month, and they would just have these public meetings about all those things. So they took all these away. Does anybody right now think that it was a good idea to get rid of the Budget and Business Services Committee? A lot of my career is based like on nonprofit fundraising. I have a track record of keeping organizations fiscally solvent. And what are you doing? This is not how we should be. Another thing I really cared about as a fundraiser is stewardship. Like, this is this public money. We should be stewarding it well. So they got away from all of this. And what I've learned from just being on monthly Zoom meetings from people all around the US is this is something called student outcomes focused governance / vision, values, goals, and guardrails. I mean, okay, so bear with me. What I found when I went to a Stop School Closures conference in Washington, D.C. in January of this year was that so many schools that were going into closures were using this same model, the student outcomes focused governance. And so what is it? It sets unrealistic goals based on standardized test scores and uses those test scores to recreate narratives around why schools should close. And this is actually, I just want to give a shout out to Moira Kalda. She's the national director from Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools. This is not me saying this. It also decreases transparency through elimination of public meetings and limiting public comment. We've seen them just like really shrink down the public comment time and eliminating oversight committees. So when you do this, when you have this kind of like mayhem and grift, it's easier to charterize the school. You know, we have Phil Kim. We have a person who worked for KIPP schools for 10 years as our school board president. There's Maria Sue, our superintendent, is giving a media interview on one side. She is somebody who's the executive director of the Parent Coalition. And then the other side, it's Phil Kim. So it's like, you chose those people to be by you for a reason. So yeah.
And that brings up the biggest point of all. What are the real issues San Francisco school district is facing? I mean, because to me, it sounds like, I mean, they just fought off a bunch of teacher layoffs and there's still discussions of closing a bunch of schools. I mean, this sounds like they're dead set. And to me, because we know that closing schools doesn't save money and doesn't help your community, that's the real issue we should be focusing on.
Exactly. And yes, that is exactly what we as and my organization, the San Francisco Education Alliance, we look to an amazing org called Journey for Justice Alliance. They are Black educators who stopped school closures in Chicago, have really turned, a lot of things in this school district for the better. And yes, they are hell-bent on closing schools. We know this is gentrification. We have heard from them and people in cities all over the US that once you close schools, that doesn't mean that you just, there's an influx in cash. It's expensive to close schools. Students wind up going to private schools or charter schools. And in charter schools, there's higher push out. It speeds up the school to prison pipeline. So jails have more cheap labor for corporations. It is an attack on the Black community. I'm just going to name it. That's what a lot of this stuff is. They tried to close Malcolm X elementary school for a reason. How dare they try to close Malcolm X? How dare they try to close a school in the South called El Dorado? Near Viz Valley. How dare they go after Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy? And what happened too? I met the president of the Hayward Teachers Union. I can't remember. He told me this, but someone in the union told me, and I looked this up online. When Matt Wayne he was our former superintendent before Maria Sue. When he was superintendent of Hayward, he tried to close down 8 schools. The community fought back. They only closed down 2. One of those schools just sat empty for about a year, and it sat empty until it burnt down because I'm not sure how it's like neighbors were complaining, like people were setting fires. And so there is now a huge, I don't know if it's been cleaned up, for a long time, there was a huge block of just blight in that neighborhood. And this tends to happen. It raises crime. And San Francisco does not exactly have a fast rate of turning around empty buildings and being able to turn them into something productive.
Yeah.
So, even if you don't have public schools, like I'm just saying, even if you're a property owner, like, do you really want to live next to a blighted school? No, It's just, they're bad. It drives up traffic. People have to drive their kids farther to school. So we do not need to have Doge here in San Francisco, and that's not going to balance the budget. And in fact, the district admitted that. They're like, yeah, this isn't saving us money. We're doing this for equity. We're like, yeah, right. We don't buy that.
Totally. I know. And I still remember Matt Wayne actually saying, oh, there's no proof that large class sizes affects learning. And it's like, that is such BS. That is so, ask the teachers.
Right.
Or ask even their kids, but yeah, I know. But a lot of that too is, schools, property, like they sit on some nice property and stuff. There's some things like my wife taught at Sunset Ridge in Pacifica, and that was one, it has this beautiful like hillside view. And I would always be like, I know real estate people want this property so bad. I would not be surprised if they try to close it down.
Oh yeah, parents at Malcolm X. I went down to this town hall Matt was when Wayne was having down there, and there are parents say like, you know what, you just want the nice views. There are beautiful views here, and in the Bay, you just want the property for the nice views. They know it, they get it.
Yeah, totally. And so, but that being said, that was Matt Wayne. Matt Wayne was terrible, but he's gone now. How are your thoughts? How have you been feeling about Maria Sue, the new superintendent?
Well, I know this weekend I saw just happened to be in an event and saw a former member of the Oakland School Board, and I said, yeah, I heard that the Oakland superintendent recently left, and he's like, yeah. I said, well, are you looking for a new one? Maria Sue's only, her contract is, I think it's only for 1.5 or 2 years. And he's right away, didn't miss a beat. He's like, oh, she doesn't even have a teaching credential. We don't want her. She's never taught in a public school, which amazes me. It's like, how do you get I don't know how much they make. Matt Wayne was making what, $200,000 or $300,000 a year. How do you run a school district if you ever worked in one?
Yeah.
I mean, this like Lyndon McMahon doesn't have any. Yeah. And so she got this job because she worked for Mayor Breed. Let's be I mean, I can't do that, but it's like, come on, And so it's like, this is the cronyism we have in our city. That's such a problem. And so I remember so what the school board had to do to get her hired or appointed was they had to pass resolutions, say, because to have someone work as a superintendent, they have to have a teaching credential by California Ed Code. They also has to have an administrative credential. You can waive those if somebody is the reason why you can waive those, if somebody is in the pipeline moves slowly because the state is underfunded. So you can okay, you're going to get your teaching credential, your administrative credential in the next 3 months. Okay, we'll hire you in good faith. So, but they did both of those things. And then community came out. I was at the school board meeting. It's packed. And I had a few people spent, but most of the community was like, yeah, this isn't right. We want to have a community process where we get to decide who the superintendent is. That is the best practice.
Yep.
Talking to the community, talking to parents, talking to educators. The union was not involved.
Democracy.
Yeah. And the only no vote, the only to appoint her was from former Commissioner Kevin Bogus, who also voted no on the waivers too. And both of the student delegates did too. This is like, I mean, the fact that I was in Anaheim, and the fact that in Anaheim, like, people know this kind of statewide, it's like, why is San Francisco having why do we have a superintendent who has no experience working in a school, especially right now? Our schools are in crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't have that anymore. And, I will say one thing. I hear when I talk to people who work at City Hall, and some progressive supervisors, progressive legislates love them. But there is this City Hall groupthink that like, oh, Maria Sue's really good. She's really great because they have these relationships with her. It's like, well, you don't have to deal with like the day-to-day things of like being a parent. You don't have a kid who actually goes to school and who sees this. These are people who are not working in education. So there is kind of this group thing because like, oh, she's great with the media. I say she's got a silver tongue, but like, that's not enough. That is not what our family needs. We need people who know how to run a school district, who've done this before, or at least taught before. Like, you need to know special education law. You've never been in a classroom and had to teach a kid with a disability. Why do you get to oversee a diverse school district of 50,000 kids?
Totally. And also, let's be clear too. We heard the same thing about Matt Wayne, people talking about how they liked working with him. And there was like people in the office that liked him, or at least I did. I knew people in the school district, even though, he totally destroyed their payroll system, So just because you're like in the vicinity of him and he seems like a good guy you'd have a drink with, doesn't mean they're actually really good at their job. Yeah, totally. Well, we should be wrapping up, but I do want to find out, how are you feeling about Joel and Gardio facing a recall, since he's the one that kicked off the teachers' recalls, and now he's facing one for himself. How do you feel?
Man, it's Schadenfreude. It's just you created this monster. It's just leopards cannot, eat my face kind of energy. And like, it's then he's making this argument. Well, we shouldn't recall people over simple issues. Dude, you did that. You did that to 3 educators. You work with
Dude.
I can't. So I don't live in that part. I don't live in District 4, but like, people are upset. It's like, I used to bike along the Great Highway every day to San Francisco State University when I used to work there. It's a great bike ride. And yeah, if you want to get more cars off the road in your district, then put more buses on the day. People will get out of their cars if there's actually a non-neoliberal solution like buses, right?
Yeah.
Or, like
a train,
right? Or get school buses, so
Yeah.
parents don't have to drive their kids to school. But like, yeah, I think like you can only, and he did that too. He rode into that supervisor position saying, he was gonna, it was gonna help families. He was gonna, keep low, I don't want to use the term, but keep it illegal. We'll just say it. Keep the emissions illegal. And he used that. He went after. He used people. I think that's what makes me the most upset is just how. This is kind of what he did. He used this angry energy to get himself in power. And what did he do? He screwed over the people who voted for him, and because he misled them, and he thought he could get away with that. So I will say anybody using that energy, it can backfire, and people can do that. Can use that against you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it's a guy I think totally deserved it too. I mean, he's a fake Democrat. He always ran as a Republican before, and it was kind of the proof that you can't win as a Republican in the city, but it's like him, Trevor Chandler, like all these people that, pretended to have their constituents in their best interests, as soon totally returned
he
around.
pretended he was a teacher, right?
Yeah, that was the worst.
He was a substitute for like a few days, but then just to put that on his, like, people don't like to be manipulated. And so, yeah, exactly. And I mean, like voters too, it's like, I know Dean Preston had an amazing video. It's on his website about, was Prop I, the real estate transfer tax. We have $500 million in money for public housing that needs to be spent. You want to help our public school families, instead of getting wound, like people should not be getting wound up about these equity for grading late ethics things. It's just like, those are good things. They're not you should be mad that we have families that are homeless. I think 4%, 1 out of every 25 students is homeless. You want to get their grades up. If you want to be upset with that, we should be furious that our families who don't have homes because Mayor Lurie is just sitting on that money, and London Breed was sitting on that money. If you want to be mad about Prop 13 reform. And I'll just make this real quick. Like Prop 13 was passed in 1978. California is the only state in the United States that does not reassess commercial property tax every year. Before 1978, we had pretty well funded schools, and now we're toward the bottom. So if you want to be really upset about that, you should go to Evolve California and sign their petition to Governor Newsom. He deserves to hear from us, and tell him to support us and get involved in their work. I mean, there's stuff we need to be upset about, but it's not the stuff that Gillis Tucker is running about. It's about making sure there is money for our schools and money for housing, and all this stuff is a distraction. And so, we're not going to be fooled. We're not that. Yeah, we're too smart for that.
Yes. Be smart about this, people. Read up about why California schools are all bad, because it is Prop 13. It really did. I mean, if you ask people that were teachers before Prop 13, they'll tell you it was heaven. I mean, it was honestly a great schools everywhere. Teams always getting new uniforms every year. Sports teams, like new textbooks every year. Not like, having to tape things together and keep them going and have everything be outdated, like it was it worked. The system worked, because there was enough money in it, and it was sabotaged by a total psycho named Howard Jarvis. But that's a whole other thing. Anyways, this has been great talking with you, Brandee. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. It's always a pleasure. Honestly, if people are concerned about this, what are the things they can do? How can they help you in your mission to make sure San Francisco schools stay high quality and aren't sabotaged by right-wing forces?
Yeah, a couple of things. I know that that there are, and I'm blanking on the names, but I know a lot of June is budget time, and so if people have time and they can go down to City Hall on Tuesdays, and I know I think if you just did there are a lot of amazing Budget Justice Coalition is doing a lot of work to try to ensure that the money is goes toward human needs and not just police overtime. I'm not saying we don't pay police, but we don't need to be paying them, huge amounts of overtime. And then secondly, go to Evolve California to their website and sign the petition to Governor Newsom. Yeah. And my group, the San Francisco Education Alliance, we're going to be, again, refreshing our social media. So you can also go to our organization's website and follow us on the socials and subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll keep people informed.
Yes, and readers, please make sure to follow Brandee on X. Are you on Blue Sky too?
No, but I'm going to be getting there shortly, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But you have a very informative feed, so it's always great to check in and follow you. Bluebird Rave. Were you a raver?
No, I was.
Okay.
The story. Shout out to my grandma. She loved bluebirds, and once I remember she was washing dishes and looked outside the window. She said, "Oh, look at the bluebird rave." So that's a shout out to my grandmother. But no, I played flute in high school, but no, that's
that's pretty funny. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I'll make sure to link that in the comments too. But yeah, please, if you're listening, follow us on all the socials as well. Support our Patreon. We could always use your support. We have bills to pay, including StreamYard. And yeah. Till next time, keep fighting the good fight.